All right, back with you again from Thoughts of Flyover Country, and we're talking about the Second Amendment, Part 2. Okay, hey, we talked about red flag laws last time out. We're still talking about red flag laws this time out. Um, Try not to pay a whole lot of attention to the glare. I've got things going here so I can keep track of stuff. But okay, we talked about red flag laws. We talked about the violation of due process last time out. Here's a little history. Why was the Second Amendment written? The Second Amendment was not written for sportsmen. It was not written for the heck of it. It was written specifically because we, the citizens of this country, are the keepers of the Constitution of the United States. Okay? That is how the founders intended it. We are the keepers, not the government. The framers of the Constitution didn't trust the government. They didn't trust any government. They knew that you have to have it, it's a necessary evil, but anytime you give people power, most people crave more power. And that's the problem. That's where we're at today. You have a lot of people out there craving power. And you have a lot of undereducated people out there who are helping them because they're undereducated and you play on their emotions and you throw fear into them. Oh my God, if we don't do something now, we're going to just be buried under mass shootings. No, we're not. The fact of the matter is that there are things that we can do to stop these mass shootings, but the Democrat Party doesn't want to discuss it. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to think about it because it kind of comes back on them. And a lot of the policies that they have insisted on over the past 40, 50 years. It has nothing to do with guns. It has everything to do with the people wielding them. But the actual purpose of the Second Amendment to the Constitution is for the citizenry. By the way, the National Guard doesn't count. Here's why. Some years back, after Vietnam, the National Guard was reorganized by the federal government. And what was formerly each individual state's own military force was streamlined to fit into the larger U.S. Armed Forces. In other words, a lot of the National Guard units that exist now, especially in flyover country, no longer have combat units. They have tactical support units. They have become truck drivers. They have become fuel runners. They have become medics. They have become medical evac units. But the combat role has dissipated. When my father was in the Army some years back, uh, he was in charge of a machine gun squad. They don't have a machine gun squad in that unit of the Nebraska National Guard anymore, because all of the roles that the National Guard is left to play are support roles. That's why the National Guard is not the same as the militia. Everything in the National Guard has been reorganized to support the Federal Army. The Federal Army was one of the things that the founders really didn't trust at all. If you go back and you look and you read, that was the whole idea of having a huge federal army was bad, because it allowed the federal government to have authority that it really shouldn't have. We have talked ourselves into this since the Cold War, because number one, we have a technologically dependent military force. In other words, the armed forces is dependent on technology. And it takes a trained, well-oiled group with long-term goals to be able to sustain that kind of a technology-based military force. So you can't really fault the federal government for putting an army in place that is long-term, because it is essential to run. I mean, when they're talking, World War II, planes were expensive, but nowadays, one fighter plane is $14 million. Okay? How many planes got shot down in World War II versus today? You don't want to lose one. That's a lot of money. So from that standpoint, we do have to have a standing army. The counterbalance is the citizens. If you go back and you look, the militia was every able-bodied male between the ages of, I think it was 16 and 58 or something like that. That was the militia. And to all intents and purposes, I think it still probably is the militia. We're talking about every able-bodied citizen. You can't just differentiate now male and female, and you probably can't differentiate much on the way of age either. I think today it would be between the ages of 18 and whatever. But the basic role is the same. The citizens are the check on the Constitution. That's why the Second Amendment is in the Constitution, is so that if the government gets out of hand, if the government becomes a runaway government, if the government starts exceeding its authority and overreaching to a greater degree, then the citizens have the power and the authority to check that government overreach. And that is today's thought from Flyover Country. Now, next time out, I'm going to actually go down through the red flag laws and the Constitution and explain in detail how each of these is violated. So stay tuned for that one, because there's a lot in the Constitution that a lot of people would really do well to know. And since I am a social studies teacher, I can probably teach it. That's our thoughts from Flyover Country. Catch you next week.